going to be one of those kind of days. You know, I have to apologize. I received a message. There's a lot of new people that interact with me, and moreover, there's like 7 different ways that you can interact with me now that I'm on all these different socials. People comment on YouTube videos. People are commenting on my TikToks. People are sending me emails. They text when I'm not in the studio. I'm trying my best to keep all you guys straight to the best of my ability. I cannot find the message, who sent it, or when it came through. So I apologize that I can't give you credit for having sent this, but he sends me a message that says, I was listening to your show on Friday, and you said as long as nothing big breaks over the weekend that we'll be doing a conversation about affordability and how much it costs to raise a child in America in 2026. Needless to say, we're going to put that conversation on the back burner for the foreseeable future, given what took place over the weekend. I think there's a lot of consternation in the building as well, wondering if I'm going to pop off, scream angrily. And don't get me wrong, the hypocrisy of MAGA knows no limits. And I'm very, very disappointed in how I'm seeing them react to what's taken place over the course of the last 48 hours. But the fact is, the military-industrial complex is bipartisan. I've said it 1,000 times over, and I'll be saying it a lot today. Much more difficult to be anti-war when your party is the one doing the war. I have seen a couple of enlightened blue MAGAs on social media right now saying, you know, it's hard for me to get upset about what Donald Trump did because I know if Biden had authorized these strikes on Iran, I'd be championing them. So at least you're willing to admit that you are willing to do war no matter what, even if the logic behind the war quite literally makes 0 sense. But for the rest of us that understand that Iran did not pose a threat to America in any kind of meaningful way, for those of us that know that the WMD lies were exactly that, lies in the early 2000s, and the claims about Iran having access to a nuke are again lies in 2026. For those of us that understand that we spent more money in the last 2 days blowing up school children, spent so much money, in fact, that we could have funded Medicare for all for 5 million Americans for an entire year, just based on the money that we spent / got shot out of the air by our own allies in the last 48 hours. There's always going to be money for war. There's always going to be money for regime change. There is always going to be money for Raytheon. We just do not have money for any of the stuff that might accidentally make your life a little bit better. We're going to dive into this from a number of different angles. I have them all laid out for me here in my notes today. But the hypocrisy of it all is where I wanted to hit it first, because I think that's the most frustrating part. You know, there were few voices louder than mine when Kamala Harris decided to march Liz Cheney around instead of, you know, a leftist or somebody that actually had messaging that was popular within the Democratic Party. I was frustrated about the funding going for Ukraine and Russia. I know not all liberals see eye to eye with me on that. That's fine. I was vehemently opposed to genocide, always have been, always will be. Specifically the genocide that we armed and funded taking place in Gaza during the final year of the Biden administration. Since Trump took office, I will admit there's a whole hell of a lot more Democrats willing to call it out for what it is. They were pretty quiet leading up to that. But conversely, and more importantly, MAGA was the anti-war party in their own minds, at the very least. And I'm happy we can finally put this garbage to bed. But in their own minds, they were the anti-war party. They were frustrated. They were like, why are we sending all this money to Ukraine? We could be giving it to Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk. I'm ticked we're sending it. I most certainly don't want it to go to healthcare or food stamps or the poor or anybody that needs assistance. But I don't want it going to Ukraine either. Don't question my logic. I tend to get really frustrated when you question my logic. Kamala Harris marched Liz Cheney around. That, to me, though, is actually a better assessment rather than sounding like her war criminal father and the rest of his cohorts.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
My belief is we will, in fact, be greeted as liberators.
To the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand.
There will always be some uncertainty about how quickly he can acquire a nuclear weapon. But we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
They can never have a nuclear weapon.
And they were never going to. And more importantly, even if they did, if you don't follow me on Facebook, I figured out how to do this on the video stream. So if you watch the show on YouTube, you'll be able to see this picture, or you can check out my socials. But I have it up on the video right now. It's a cartoon from 2018 from mintpressnews.com. And in the commercial, it shows a country without nukes, and the country is Libya. And there's Uncle Sam in an all-white tux, and he's got a big brown boot on, and he is stomping Libya to the point where the ground is shattering beneath his boot. Then there's a country with nukes, and it's North Korea, and it shows Uncle Sam picking up his boot to stomp down on the ground like he did in Libya before becoming concerned because there's a nuke under his boot now instead of just, people. And that, to me, has been my assessment of why we have been pushing back against Iran having nukes since you guys have known me. That's always been my message. And I oftentimes compare it to the story that I used when I was producing, where I asked my host, the host that I produced for, why aren't we just drone striking Putin? Not that I'm in favor of civilian casualties to take out a threat, but we already made it clear, even during the Obama years. Obama drone striked terrorists while also killing civilians. He bombed a wedding because one of the people there was alleged to be a known terrorist. And I said, so clearly we have no gripes about civilian casualties. Why aren't we just drone striking Putin? And very simply, the host just said, because Russia has nukes and they would respond if we did it. The idea that Iran would get a nuke and then immediately proceed to bomb America, or Israel for that matter, just for the sake of flattening all of human society, I think is a far cry away from reality. And it is much more likely that they are looking to just not get bombed into oblivion by whoever is on the whoever is in the White House at that particular moment. And the reason why I say whoever is in the White House is because I think it's important for me to highlight this for you guys. I'm now going to go down country by country for different countries that America has attacked since the turn of the 21st century, and then we're going to talk about which presidents did it. And again, there's a visual aid for anybody who is interested in checking this out on the YouTube page here. Afghanistan was bombed by Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump. Iran, just by Trump. Iraq, Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump. Libya, Obama and Trump. Nigeria, Trump. Pakistan, Bush, Obama, and Trump. Somalia, Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump. Why are all the Somalis here in America? Maybe because we can't stop bombing them would probably be a pretty good guess. Syria, Obama, Biden, and Trump. Venezuela, just Trump. Yemen, Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump. Now, you may notice that the most anti-war president of our lifetime is the only person that appears on the bombing regime for every single one of the countries that I mentioned. But there are 4 of the countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, and Yemen, that have been bombed by every single president since the turn of the millennium. Syria and Pakistan have been bombed by 3 presidents, and Libya 2, and the remainder have just been bombed by current President Trump or previous President Trump, depending on the country that you're talking about there. But so I'm going to be talking about this for the better part of the first hour, but it's kind of one of those things, much like with the cost of living, that we do not have an anti-war party. We have an anti-war movement coming from the other side of the duopoly, depending on which party is in power. When Obama was president, there were reasons we couldn't pull out of Afghanistan. When Trump was president, there were reasons we couldn't pull out of Afghanistan. And as I highlighted when it happened, Biden pulled us out of Afghanistan, something objectively popular, something that has been popular for over a decade. And what did the Republican Party do? They said he left billions of dollars of equipment there. What kind of departure was that? And then meanwhile, you watch what just took place over the weekend and you see people saying, what's the plan going forward? It's never a matter. They want to objectively vilify people that end wartime conflicts by finding something that went wrong with it. And then conversely, they will pretend to demonize elements of an attack on another country, like what we did to Iran, but never actually condemning the actions itself. Very famously over the weekend, Mark Kelly Sunday morning said he didn't know if he was a yes or a no on a War Powers Act because he needed to learn more about Donald Trump's strategy for what comes next. What proceeded to happen was a crap storm that I think blue MAGA libs are going to realize is going to happen more and more frequently as a frustration with finding a political party that isn't right of center continues to grow. And a few hours later, he announced that he was going to vote for the War Powers Act to be enacted. Don't worry, even if it got through, everyone voting understands that Donald Trump is going to veto anything that comes to his desk. And in no world are 2/3 of elected officials going to vote in favor of hamstringing the president. So you don't need to worry about that. And thankfully, we've got big-brained liberals like John Fetterman saying, don't worry, even if it did come to his desk, he would also vote no on it because blowing up brown people specifically in schools is just too appealing to MAGA and blue MAGA alike. I have a lot to say about this, and I see we already have a call lining up, and we're going to jump into that here in a second, and we'll get your texts in here as well. But the fact is, the rationale is not lining up for why we are doing this. We do not have a full-throated condemnation coming from the Democratic Party. And just to put some perspective on it, this is just one example of a far-right poster, but Gunther Eagleman is one of the most popular right-wing accounts on Twitter. 1.7 million followers. On Sunday, starting at 6 a.m., that account posted 514 times. That's once every 2 minutes without taking a break. The pro-Iran war propaganda has already been pushed out. It is automated, and it is going to trick low IQ Americans into thinking something beneficial just happened. Now, I'm going to take the first call here, and we're going to keep this conversation rolling over the course of at least this hour. We'll see who we have here. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Is it me?
Yep.
It's Cindy from Appleton.
What's up, Cindy?
Well, I think, Ben, the objective here is we are coming up to a vote in November, and as long as he can declare a national emergency, he can remain as the dictator. And I think this is just part of his plan, and this is just the beginning.
You could be right. Just based on the way he talks, and there's obviously clips circulating about him saying that when he was sitting in the room with Zelensky a while back, and that could be part of what ends up happening here. But as I've stated, Cindy, in order for that to happen, I'm not saying that he's above it or wouldn't do it. I'm saying he doesn't have the backing for it. I'm saying that he is so unpopular right now. Even war with Iran, only 27% of people are in favor of it. Unfortunately, only like 47% can say that they know enough to be opposed to it, but it's still almost double what's out there right now. People are upset with his ICE handling. The economy sucks. In order to pull this kind of crap, you have to actually... Like, I'm not saying I would be okay with it if he were popular, but I'm saying that the guy is universally hated by everyone outside of the most diehards. So call me Pollyannish, but I don't think there's enough of a backing for him to actually even consider trying to pull that off. I hope that's the case, but we'll see what happens. But I'm not saying you're crazy for saying it. That's for sure.
Well, I hope you're right. But like you say, the war machine propaganda is coming out, and that might change some hearts and minds.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I appreciate the call, Cindy. Always good to hear from you. And like I said, it's never been the reason we have term limits is not because of us having a dictator. It's because we had somebody that was actually willing to hold billionaires to account, which is why we ended up getting term limits on the presidency. But it can save us from people like this jag as well. We'll have to wait and see what happens from there. But it's such an overreach. And to all of the MAGAs that are out there, One thing we can say, Joe Biden did a genocide. He funded perpetual war in Ukraine that absolutely could have been solved by diplomacy if we just butted out. One thing that didn't happen was American soldiers were killed in duty, in the line of duty, for no reason other than Israel wanted us to bomb Iran into oblivion. And I can't stress enough, I think the most frustrating part, and I'm thankful that I do the show the way that I do it, because I know that I can say this, and anybody who listened to this program during the aftermath of the immediate aftermath, I should say, of October 7th knows that I have pretty firm ground to stand on here. Shortly after Israel's bombing campaign of Gaza took off, and this will tie into Iran, I promise you, there was a hospital, Al-Shifa Hospital, if you remember correctly. It was bombed, which is a war crime. And immediately, American propaganda networks began questioning whether or not the hospital was bombed by Israel, or was it an accident coming from Hamas, because their equipment is so much cheaper and less effective than what Israel has access to, because they have the funding of a country who doesn't give their citizens universal health care or pay for college, because we have unlimited bombs. By the way, both Israel and Iran have universal health care as well as affordable college for their citizens there. Thankfully, we can just bomb everything into oblivion, which makes me feel safe and proud to be an American. When Al-Shifa Hospital was bombed, it was said that it was a Hamas headquarters. It was said that it needed to happen. Israel has the right to defend itself. And we don't even know if they did it or not. And that's how American outlets reported on it. We then found out that Israel 100%, in fact, did blow up the Al-Shifa Hospital, one of 36 hospitals in Gaza. Once that happened, the story fell from the mainstream entirely, and they no longer were trying to defend what obviously took place. Israel then proceeded to blow up the other 35 hospitals without any kind of Western media coverage whatsoever. Flash forward to this weekend, a school was blown up by either American or Israeli munitions. The same media companies are now questioning whether or not it was Iran that blew up their own school. I've seen anywhere between 80 and 153 children were killed during the bombing, all in the name of going for weapons of mass destruction that do not exist. But, you know, some people are going to be stupid. Now, I can't stop them, not calling names, but also definitely am. Grow the hell up. If you were alive, if you're listening to me and you're 14, you have an excuse. If you're listening to me and you were cognizant during 9/11, you're very, very gullible and deserve to be made fun of. The way the New York Times, let's just use the failing New York Times as an example. After the school was struck, it says, Iran says dozens are killed in strike on school. Meanwhile, the same day, they have an article, 9 killed in Israeli city near Jerusalem after Iranian missile strike. See how it names the actor. It states that 9 people were dead as a fact. But when a school is blown up in Iran and it looks as though Western powers did it, it's Iran says dozens were killed, thus casting doubt on a strike. Oh, it must have been God, because who could have possibly seen it coming? They obfuscate who's responsible for what took place. Both of those articles coming out in the same day, both essentially telling the same story, but from entirely different perspectives, depending on who was impacted impacted by these wartime activities. MAGA needs to push back against this if it's going to stop. MAGA's got to, I can't say that, grow up. I was going to say grow something else. MAGA needs to grow up and push back against this. They claimed to be the anti-war party. Nothing could be further from the truth right now. Difference being, of course, now the economy's worse. We have Americans getting murdered in the streets, but there are less black pilots. So, like, it's hard to say if whether or not this presidency has been a success or not. But also, Democrats need to be able to stand up and say with a full throat that this is bad. This is not what they would be doing. And I'll be honest, I don't think that they're going to be able to convince me that that is the case. They're not going to be able to convince me that they are the ones. By and large, there will be a handful of Democrats. I'm willing to bet AOC comes out of the woodwork and condemns what happens. And I have more to say about AOC later on in the program, because Democrats are already mounting a stiff opposition against her trying to rise in prominence, because they want to make sure they have a presidential candidate that absolutely will continue bombing the crap out of the Middle East like every other president that came before them, to a differing degrees, whether it was Republican or Democrat. This is a consistent within our Congress. To show you how much our media is kind of backwards in this conversation, this happened on NBC News yesterday, talking to a high-ranking Iranian official, because in the aftermath, and I'm sure you saw, U.S. bases in other countries, not in America, but in other countries, ended up getting attacked in the aftermath of what took place. Listen to this question in the almost befuddled nature in which the Iranian official needs to talk about what they were just asked, given what's taken place over the last 48 hours.
So for clarity, you said that your missiles cannot reach the United States by design, that you do not want to reach the United States, but you also said it would be necessary as a defensive vehicle, that you could if necessary. So to be clear, are you committing that Iran is not and will not build missiles that would have the capability to reach the United States?
I can confirm, yes.
Sir, if that's a red line for you, why is attacking U.S. military bases abroad justified?
But because they are attacking us. They are U.S. military, installations, facilities, bases who are attacking us. We are under attack. Why don't you, recognize this fact? We are under the attack by U.S. by U.S. forces in the region. So we have every right to defend ourselves. And how to defend ourselves? We attacked, the U.S. bases. This is obvious. This is a very simple fact. And I hope that, and I'm sure that people would understand that. We are not the one who attacked Americans. We are only defending ourselves.
That's the kind of logic that shouldn't need an explanation. Why are you attacking U.S. bases? Because the U.S. is currently embroiled in an attack on us right now. What the hell are you talking about? And 4 American armed forces members have lost their lives in the last 48 hours. Again, something that didn't take place under the Biden administration, which everybody said on the right was the pro-war administration. Don't get me wrong, 100,000 Palestinian civilians lost their lives under Joe Biden. I think loss of life in general is absolutely not only a tragedy, but completely avoidable more often than not. And I'm not offering Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, for that matter, a pass on what their presidency was, but it never escalated to this point. And as much as Donald Trump wants to convince his cult that this is going to be a short incursion, I just find it hard to believe that it's actually going to work out that way. And for what? Genuinely, for what? Other than access to the largest supply of lithium that's out there, which is obviously the answer. For what? Why is this happening? There is no need for this to be taking place. No one listening to me is going to have an empirically better life because of what just happened. What was the point of this? There was no point to this, other than causing chaos, other than what seems to me doing what Israel wanted to ultimately see happen. There were no weapons of mass destruction. There were never going to be. It's a 2003 redux, and the same people who fell for it in 2003 are falling for it in 2026. And I think the most frustrating part is that we've already, like, I totally get why everyone was mad in the early 2000s. I get why you bought the rhetoric. I get why things played out the way that they did. In 2026, we got to be smarter than this. We got to be more aware. We have to be able to call a spade a spade. I'm not making excuses. The leader in Iran seems like a giant pile of trash based on the way that everybody feels about the guy. Like, I'm not heartbroken that this guy lost his life. I'm heartbroken that a bunch of children got bombed in the name of it. And I'm watching right-wing media heads chastise people running for governor in Wisconsin for highlighting that Western allies, or possibly America in general, bombed a school. And they're saying, oh, parroting Iranian propaganda. No, the propaganda is the part where we were justified in any of the actions that are being that are taking place. That's the propaganda. You just don't want to hear that because it's going to get you labeled as Antifa. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, Cynthia in Florida. I'm going to disagree with you on Hatami for a bit, but you were talking about Palestine. I saw the news, and I saw one of the ambulance staff, and he was complaining they couldn't get to the people who were impacted by the incoming missiles. And I thought, well, now you know how the Palestinians feel.
Sure.
When their ambulances have been blocked, and people were allowed to bleed out in the street rather than be safe. But Hatami, I will give him this credit, and I bet you the United States and Israel want a more radical cleric in charge. We love an enemy. This man issued a fatwa, which is a religious edict, that they were not to develop nuclear weapons for war or biological weapons for war because he was un-Islamic. Now that he's gone, they get a more radical person in there. They're going to the nuclear store. And I can't say I blame them, frankly. We saw what happened to Iraq when they got rid of their weapons. We saw what happened to Libya when they got rid of their weapons. There is just so much of this.
Cynthia, realistically, I feel like specifically Republicans should be able to understand it's the same logic they use about getting rid of the Second Amendment. No, I need that just in case the government starts acting up. And then we're like, hey, other countries, give us all your stuff. And then when we want, or all your weapons, and then when we want your stuff, we'll bomb you into oblivion. And then the media kicks into overdrive. Like, I promise you, Cynthia, there are right-wingers clipping this audio to be like, oh, look at the pro-terrorist left saying X, Y, and Z instead of just right. Exactly. Go ahead.
It's not pro-terrorist, and I'm tired of who we define as terrorists.
Yeah.
And I said, it was in your email. I said most of the countries that we have attacked are not controlled by our central banking system. We hate that.
Oh,
we
without
want to
a
control
doubt.
Everything.
Yeah.
But one book I want people to read is Killing Hope by the late William Bloom, L-U-M. And look at all of the places we have decimated. And Dr. King, what he said years ago is right. The United States is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. That still is true. If Americans don't wake up to this, we're going to perish. You know, there's nothing else I can say about this.
Yeah, I hope you're wrong, but everything you say tracks. And I appreciate the call, Cynthia. And that kind of leans into, I should say, the talk that I always have surrounding the perpetual nature of the military-industrial complex. For us to continue living the lives that we live, we have to invest a larger and larger sum of money into keeping these bases staffed, into keeping other countries terrified of what we might do if they don't give us everything we want all the time. And there's an existential nature to this because, yeah, fundamentally, of course, you want to be on the top of the pile, right? You want access to these things, but the degrading systems that we have in this country, the healthcare system that leaves people behind, and the education system that leaves people behind, and the family raising systems in general that are leaving people behind. The reason that they are falling behind in general is because we have to continue facilitating the bombs and missiles if we're going to maintain worldwide. much like every other empire that exists. You overextend and you let your people at home suffer, and the outcome is always the same. One more call, then we have to get to break. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Good morning, Ben. It's Gary. You asked what was the point? Well, you know, I remember back in the 19th century and the 20th century, the German philosophy was you need a good war every 25 years. You got to keep your plowshare sharp, and you rebuild your human capabilities after you get all your people slaughtered, and then it takes another 25 years to build up your young men. But I'm thinking that we run all these exercises, military exercises around the world, and we just did the incursion over in Venezuela. I'm thinking they just had to do an actual test to see what our capabilities are. We went into Iraq with Schwarzkopf, and that was a full-blown logistical thing. And this is probably the next great one that we had, where we used everything except for ground troops and tanks and APCs, whatnot. So I think it was just a tune-up, and they needed an actual test to see if they were, as they say, integrated and comprehensive and logistically capable of doing something like this. This has been, like they said, this has been going on for years, and the planning over the last 6 months has been pretty intensive. You could see the logistical movements. The planes were all moving out. Things were being shipped out. Personnel were being moved around. It wasn't any secret. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there, Gary. I mean, I definitely don't even want to see what we're capable of because, again, and I appreciate the call, I guess my main frustration with it is I'm not naive. When there's an actual threat, yeah, of course. But as Cynthia highlights, what is difficult to avoid is we are oftentimes the aggressors. We are the people who are putting people in these positions. Then their refugees come here and we get to double down on that because we get cheap labor and we can vilify a brown population to trick people into voting against their own self-interest in the name of perpetuating the military-industrial complex. It's cyclical. And you watch these things happen, and unfortunately, I am not seeing a loud enough condemnation. Liberals are mad Donald Trump didn't say pretty please before bombing a school. Liberals would like to live in a world where you have to ask permission first before you use AI technology to blow up a school. Whereas I think there's a growing contingency of people that would rather we just not blow up the school and invest in our own systems. Donald Trump and MAGA clearly aren't that, but neither is Blue MAGA. And ignoring that reality is going to continue the cyclical nature of this violence in perpetuity until we can stand up against it. I have more thoughts. We have a very short break here, and we're coming right back. So stay where you are. Anyone else wants to chime in? I got a ton of texts. We'll get you guys in. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150, and we'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. All right. I'm getting message from a couple of different sources here. I'm going to try my best to get everybody in without skipping anybody here. I'm going to start in the emails. Kurt says, in the service or whatever, there's a saying, the beatings will continue until the morale gets better. We can't have a mentality of shoot your neighbor before he shoots you. Wake up, American people. I personally can't wait for midterm voting for a change. It may be too late. You flag to me needs to be backed and reinforced with democracy. We need hope, not adverbs and adjectives. Actions, words will move closer to the true. Here's the thing. I hear what you're saying. I am not convinced that midterms are going to save us. Not from a Donald Trump is going to try and remain in power perspective. I mean that from a, you have to convince me that Democrats wouldn't have done the same thing in Venezuela and in Iran. They just would have been more polite about doing it. I can't even say that they wouldn't have blown up the school because, again, there are reports that Anthropic, Claude, we talked about Anthropic, I think, a week and a half ago, how there's a chance they may no longer be partnering with the Defense Department anymore here in America. Allegedly, that's where the decision to fire these missiles came from, based on the reporting that's available in the BBC right now. I am not convinced that Democrats don't intend to do the exact same things. And again, in the 10 o'clock hour, because I want to dedicate this first hour to the actual conflict itself, but there are groups already coming out trying to figure out a way to push centrist blue MAGA libs to the top of tickets because they don't want to see. There is a growing frustration. The fact is, people are ready. Palestine and what took place in Gaza is a litmus test for the Democratic Party going forward. You're already seeing it take place in primaries in Maine and Michigan and Illinois, where candidates are being pushed to acknowledge, like, not only is what's happening in Gaza a genocide, but we're not going to take AIPAC donations anymore. And that's not going to get quieter as we get closer to 2028. It's only going to grow louder. And you can already tell that the center right party, the Democrat Party, as opposed to the far right party, the MAGA movement, isn't ready to give up its never-ending war either. And it's until we get all of these bastards out of there that we're going to see the kind of change that we want. Again, 27% of people. Yes, something like close to 60% of MAGA's in favor of it, but don't worry. As soon as Gavin Newsom has the handle, they'll be super anti what's happening again. So you just have to wait, because they are a cult and it's pretty difficult to avoid. So just wait for the other half of the duopoly to have the reins again, and MAGA will be anti-war again. The fact is, the bulk of us don't want to see this. Liberals, I'm going to need you to focus on not doing wars in the name of defending democracy. They can defend their own democracy. They don't need you bombing people into oblivion for them. And then MAGA just hasn't ever seen a war that they don't like, apparently. Joe, who served, says, let me say again, war does not solve problems. It creates new ones. Been there, done that. I think that is the consensus for most people here. Bruce says, enjoying the show. Brett, a bit from Popular Information. That's a journalistic rag that's out there. Read a bit from Popular Info this morning, outlining how Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have been lobbying Trump to attack Iran. An interesting connection is that Jared Kushner has been negotiating Middle East strategy and is on the payroll from both of those countries, according to Popular Info. Oh yeah, there's a hell of a list of elements. And for those of you that haven't seen it, one of those gambling sites that I was talking about last week, I don't know if it was Kalshi or not, so I don't want to falsely attribute the information, but 5 random bettors all bet that conflict would break out on February 28th. Between the 5 of them, they made like $1.2 million. It seems pretty clear to me that there's also an element to enrich people tangential to the administration here. At least it's not Hunter Biden, though. Don't call me stupid. It's incredibly infuriating, and I'm sure that there's an element of the Kushner element here as well. But again, that's not Hunter Biden, so it's not illegal. KG says, good morning, Ben. Taking out dictators is easy. Preventing a power vacuum and its attendant chaos is hard. Given America's recent track record in meddling with Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, I don't feel good about the immediate future for the Iranian people. Well, at least maybe the refugees will come here and then we'll accuse them of like childcare fraud or something. They have that to look forward to. I'm getting a flashback to 1991 when Bush and Elder Bush encouraged the Kurdish people to rebel against Saddam Hussein, then did nothing to back up those words, and a massacre ensued. Not our finest hour, plus Trump is lazier and even less honest than Bush was. Follow his urging at your peril. Oh, yeah, and the data's already out there. We had been encouraging the protests where tens of thousands of Iranians were killed, and then we turn around and say, we got to look out for the humanitarian nature of the people being killed in Iran. as we're watching this administration rip food stamps out of blind single women's hands. Yeah, I'm sure these are the people that are worried about humanitarian rights. It's a matter of not being able to have your cake and eat it too. And this show kind of shines a spotlight on that, much to the chagrin of anybody who wants to pretend that what Donald Trump is doing is somehow big-brained. A different Joe says, who would have thought that? Trump lied to his base. He said he would not start a war and put American soldiers in danger. Now he shared that there will be a lot more brave soldiers losing their lives. Most of us knew he was lying. What happened to the Epstein files? Well, as Cynthia calls it, she's referring to it as Operation Epstein Fury, which I think is probably an appropriate way to handle that. But at the end of the day, this is all about the fact that Donald Trump's name is mentioned 38,000 times in the unredacted portion of the Epstein files. I'm going to have to rifle through some of these here. Jim says the girls' school blown up in Iran. We all know records show that our current president had zero concern for underage females. The betting for sure was on Polymarket. Serious profits for a few, and it happens that Donald Trump Jr. is on their advisory board. Again, Jim, not a scandal. It has nothing to do with Hunter Biden. Jerry says, one of my MAGA acquaintances posted this on social media. I support President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Do you actually know the person in real life, Jerry? Because I'm beginning to bet that they're all bots at this point. I'll tell you what, we have Ben, Brian, and Jim with a follow-up there. I'm going to get all you guys on, but I'm up against a hard out here, so I'm going to have to call it there. And we'll come back and keep this conversation rolling. And I want to talk a little bit about Third Way. If you haven't heard about Third Way, this is why this show can get angry sometimes. I am not fooled by what Donald Trump is. This presidency is exactly what I thought it would be. Less jobs, worse economic situation, war happening everywhere. My frustration stems from a centrist Democratic Party that would happily hand this country over to people wired like Trump rather than letting an actual leftist win. I'm going to highlight what I mean more and continue this conversation about Iran on the other side of the break. Anyone else wants to chime in, 920-281-1150. We'll be back in just a little bit, guys. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right, and we're back to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company that the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, you can speculate as to what we talked about for the first hour here. Armed conflict in Iran. And I'll be honest, I'm not going to say that I completely absolved myself. What's funny is Saturday morning, I was like doing a technology-free morning. I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't watching TV. I wasn't doing anything technologically related because if you are, it's just kind of my own mental health process. That's the best way that I can describe it. Is you got to separate yourself from it sometimes. And and it's not even like it was long. Like I got up at 7 a.m. on Saturday, and I would say I didn't touch any technology until 11. And I go over to my phone at 11 a.m. on Saturday. And let's just say a lot of people had some thoughts in my personal life as to what had been taking place. And my phone had been blown up, unbeknownst to me, the entirety of Saturday morning, given what had taken place. I obviously immediately dove into any source that I could find to learn about what had happened, the ways that it was being reported, why we found ourselves in this position to begin. Hell, even during the CBS Newsmax things that we play at the top of every hour, it's just clips of Pete Hegseth saying, Iran will never get a nuclear. Great, they weren't going to get a nuclear weapon. We just bombed a school for no reason. And again, I'm speaking to all the lefties in the audience right now, actual lefties. It's a very disheartening day because I don't know where to turn with this, because I'll be honest, I could only stomach so much Fox News before I found that I myself started cheering for war in the Middle East. In fact, the only skepticism aimed towards Donald Trump's decision to blow up a school, among other things, was that some conservative House members were upset because now would we have enough wherewithal to also be able to bomb China if they did something to Taiwan? So thankfully, we've got the Republican Party to always be worried about the wars of tomorrow while starting the wars of today. I don't know where else we would be without that capacity there. But so I could only stomach so much Fox News before I was like, okay, I get their message. Our dear leader did awesome things, and if Kamala Harris had done it, we'd be questioning her into oblivion. So I switched to left-leaning media to see how it's portrayed. And initially, it was portrayed as a war of choice. You know, the thing that John Fetterman ran on in 2022, saying that he would eliminate wars of choice, now giving it his seal of approval. I'll never know what they have on him to make him do all this dumb stuff, but they better be good. The pictures better be good of whatever it is they caught him doing. But what I noticed while watching Democratic coverage of what was taking place was they would have military officials on, because never forget, MSNBC and CNN are chock full of AIPAC donors and former conservative press secretaries and RNC chairs and campaign strategists, and fill in the blank here. The leftist networks have George Bush Jr. Communication secretaries. It has Jeb Bush's campaign manager. It has people that are draped all over the neocon Republican Party, top to bottom, including Morning Joe, who literally was a Republican. As Republicans say, that's the leftist network. Don't ask me to define things, please. So I wanted to see how the Bush-era Republican channels were portraying this war, and they would bring military officials on and they'd say, from a military perspective, this was a phenomenal operation. It's just a what do we do next, and did the president ask permission before he did it? But nobody condemning what took place. And that points to a much larger conversation to be had. And I want to start here, and we're going to branch out a little further. But primaries are tomorrow in a number of different places for Senate candidates. Some of them are bumped a little bit later on in the year. But one of the ones that has everybody's eyes right now is the Democratic Senate primary in Texas between James Tellerico and Jasmine Crockett. I'm now going to present you with two different statements surrounding Donald Trump's bombing of a school, among other things, and learning like my perspective on why I think there is no anti-war party here. At least yet. There could be. But you're watching the establishment kick into overdrive. Case in point, here's Jasmine Crockett's statement. Why is it that the president refuses to even pretend that he cares about following the law? I've been stomping and telling people that this election is life or death. Congress, not the president, but Congress has the exclusive authority to declare war. Speaker Johnson needs to call us in immediately, and it is time for the House and Senate to pass a war powers resolution. This is how you prove your love and respect for the Constitution. This is how you show your constituents that you are truly patriots. It is time for us collectively as Dems and Repubs to stand up to the president. Please call your reps in the House and the Senate and urge them to take a vote on the war powers resolution. It was a very well thought out and coherent statement that made sure that the procedures necessary to start a forever war, you know, the kind of wars that have been happening since before I was born, are launched in the appropriate manner, the way they have been in the times of yore. Here's James Tellerico's statement on the same measure. No more forever wars. That's it. Not saying why aren't we voting on it, saying we're done with this lifestyle. Now, one of those messages is much more impressive than the other message. Can we all agree on that? I have a feeling no, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to convince somebody, again, with approval ratings as of the initial poll after what took place, 27% approve. Something tells me that the 27% approval there overlaps with the 27% approval for a mass Gestapo murdering Americans with impunity. 27% approve, 43% disapprove, 30% are not sure. Anti-war Republicans are 55 to 33 in favor of war. Whoops, looks like they're not anti-war after all. Democrats are 7 to 74% disapprove of what went on, and I'm willing to bet that 7% is all currently in Congress. Independents are at 19 to 44 disapproval of what ended up taking place. That's as per what's available in Reuters right now. So why am I bringing this up? How am I marrying the primaries taking place tomorrow, or the elections that are in the limelight that are taking place in a number of places like Maine, and even to a certain extent, not that the governor of Wisconsin is going to be able to have a say in what took place, but you're watching what's happening in the Middle East be talked about by gubernatorial candidates here in our state as well. What do these all have to do with one another? Well, it shows that based on who you're willing to attack, and I've stated this 1,000 times over, Governor Newsom is willing to go on Charlie Kirk's show, formerly, and talk about the transes to his heart's content, but he won't come on a progressive show and talk about why he won't sign on to a billionaire tax. Andrew Cuomo is invited on to Fox News and right-leaning podcasts because it's okay. Yes, he's a Democrat. Yes, he's accused 12 times over of sexual harassment at the workplace, but at least he's not running on making sure corporate landlords can't gouge their tenants. So I'd rather, as a Republican, Cuomo win than someone like Mamdani, who actually means business. Fast forward to yesterday, Ted Cruz, who has never seen a war in the Middle East that he doesn't like. Allegedly, he represents what the Republican Party is against, despite the fact that 55% of the Republican Party is in favor of what Donald Trump did. Graham Plattner, who is the progressive running for Senate in Maine, posted onto socials, because as much as socials are a death trap these days, it provides you a finger on the pulse if you're willing to search for it and get through all the botted and automated response. Senator Susan Collins, who is currently in Congress right now, has stated, the Iranian regime's pursuit of nuclear weapons that is non-existent, ballistic development, and support for terrorist proxies pose a serious threats to Americans' national security. I would love an explainer as to how. And that of our allies, as well as the stability of the Middle East. Our highly skilled and brave service members are in my prayers. I'm sure they are, as they perform this mission. Donald Trump, however, referred to them as suckers and losers, but that you are in Susan Collins' prayers, so you at least have that going for you. Sustained combat operations require full engagement with Congress. These are important questions that will be discussed in the Senate's classified briefings with administrative officials next week. I mean, yeah, starting a war is a big deal, but is it like ruin my weekend big deal? No, of course not. Graham Plattner, who is running against her, who's currently beating the hell out of everybody in the polling, much to Democrat and Republican chagrin, has stated, I can assure you your prayers didn't save my friends from dying in the last war that you supported. Pretty full-throated attack on what she is, especially given that he served in that war that so many chicken hawks pushed American soldiers into. Speaking of chicken hawks, Ted Cruz responded, were your friends Germans wearing Nazi tattoos like you? Very famously, he had the Totenkopf tattoo on him, something that I would argue 95% of Americans had no idea, present company included, had no idea were affiliated with Nazi insignia, that he got blacked out as soon as he learned that it was, in fact, a Nazi tattoo. And you are seeing Senator Cruz willing to attack this individual because he represents a removal of the status quo. Susan Collins is the status quo. Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, who is reaching a term limit there, who Chuck Schumer forced into this race because Graham Plattner has the courage to say what Israel is doing in Gaza is a genocide, who has the courage to say, regardless of if Donald Trump asked permission to do another forever war, maybe we should just stop doing wars. Those are the people that the Uniparty feels comfortable attacking. There's a lot of right-wingers who felt as though a vote for Donald Trump or J.D. Vance was a vote against the Uniparty. That has been proven to be 100% factually inaccurate. There is no more backtracking. There is no more, well, actually, if you think about it, this is really important. No. You said you were against this. Here's the real kicker that MAGA struggles with listening to this show, because they know damn well in their heart of hearts, if Kamala Harris won the presidency and we found ourselves in this exact same position, I would be doing the show the exact same way. It is them who is trying to bend over backwards to try and find a way to explain away how their anti-war, he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize president is actually just as guilty of furthering forever wars as any other president in this century and going back beyond then. I saw Ben had mentioned in the previous hour, as I talked about the Afghanistan pullout, he said Afghanistan withdrawal, 13 U.S. soldiers were killed. It's a devastating reality. A suicide bomber showed up as the departure was happening and blew himself up, taking the lives of 13 U.S. soldiers and wounding another 40 or so. What was the other option? Stay there forever? Because Donald Trump and Obama both ran on getting us out of there, and both of them chickened out on getting us out of there. The loss of life is devastating, but the fact is we were doing a 20-year occupation that we had no business starting to begin with, and most certainly could not do for the rest of human existence. What Donald Trump did this weekend that resulted in the loss of 4 lives of American soldiers. What Donald Trump did this weekend that resulted in the death of between 80 and 153 school children because a school got blown up. Iranian propaganda, as MAGA would tell you. Unfortunately, facts don't care about your feelings, snowflakes. All of this took place for no reason, for made-up things that nobody can back up. And the Democratic Party cannot find themselves with the spine to push back against such an objectively unpopular decision. Even within MAGA, only 55% of people are in favor of the thing they claimed they were anti for the last 4 years. Don't call them a cult. Their fifis get hurt. Even 55% of MAGA. And Democrats can't find a way to say that this is an unnecessary war, that Iran cannot nuke America, and even if they did develop a nuke, it's not in the name of nuking America. And again, I use this opportunity to put the picture up on my YouTube video, and it is available on my socials as well. The only difference between a country with nukes and a country without nukes is America can bomb you into oblivion for no reason other than we want your stuff. And that's why people go for nukes, and we get confused why people do it. It's not a confusing process when you really break it down. And Mark Kelly has to be bludgeoned into saying that he will vote for a War Powers Act and in order to get it across the finish line. Because when originally asked, he had to look over the game plan. He had to see what Donald Trump's plans were next, because so far it was a rousing success. Meanwhile, someone like Graham Plattner is willing to say with his entire throat, because he did serve in a pointless war based on a lie about nukes, that this is not the way we can continue doing things. As I stated in the first hour, in 2 days, we spent the same amount of money of what it would cost to give 5 million Americans Medicare for all. The thing that Republican and blue MAGA Dems repeatedly tell us we do not have the funds to do. We found that money in 2 days in the name of blowing up school children. If you think this show was aggressive in 2024 when we were funding war crimes, what do you think this show is going to sound like when we're doing war crimes? 920-281-1150. We have James Tellerico willing to say no new wars, while Jasmine Crockett hems and haws about norms and making sure that Congress is asked. And if you highlight this in the mainstream, you are called a bigot. If you stand up for Graham Plattner saying we're done with forever wars, you are highlighted as an anti-Semite. And as I've been kind of teasing throughout the entire show here, Axios is reporting as of this morning, and I'm reading directly from the article I printed off. Moderate Democrats are on a mission to stop the next Bernie Sanders, starting with New York Rep AOC. Third Way, an influential center-left group, is bringing together hundreds of elected officials, party leaders, and operatives here this weekend to build a case for nominating a middle-of-the-road Democrat for 2028. Because a middle-of-the-road Democrat will do like Biden did last 4 years, will do like Obama did for 8 years, will do like Trump did when he, and I'm bringing it up on the YouTube page again, bombed Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq and Libya and Nigeria and Pakistan and Somalia and Syria and Venezuela and Yemen. Yes, Bush, Obama, and Biden also bombed some of those countries. Only one president bombed all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of those countries, and it's the peaceful president. The only party speaking out consistently against these actions is actual leftists. And a lot of Republican rationale for not continuing to look for leftist candidates is because they're willing to tax billionaires at a higher rate, which apparently Republicans and blue MAGA Dems are vehemently opposed to. Normally, these are the kind of shows that are met with a much more angsty version of me, a much angrier version of me. I had 2 days to put my thoughts in order as to what we are looking at here. Donald Trump's a fraudulent populist. He's a warmonger. He is engaging in war crimes. The blood of dead Iranian children is on Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump's hands and was enacted by American military operatives. Waka waka MAGA. But blue MAGA does not have an answer to this. As long as they are willing to force a Gavin Newsom or a Mark Kelly or, God forbid, another run of Kamala Harris up to the forefront again, they will be able to say, yeah, Donald Trump's a trash-ass president who did nothing but blow up our economy and make my life more expensive, but something about trans people, because that's what liberals are going to run on. And yes, it's stupid logic. And yes, you're voting against your own self-interest. And yes, you kind of are Manchurian candidates that don't really think for yourselves. But it doesn't change the fact that in order to win elections, you have to do what's popular. And what's popular is funding the American working class and not blowing up school children. I shouldn't have to be the operative that helps Americans understand this, but I'm going to have to be. Because as KG says, if a President Harris had bombed Iran with equally flimsy excuses, I'd be just as angry at her. Tallarico has the right of it. No more forever wars. What liberals need to focus on, and I think KG is aware enough to understand it, what liberals need to focus on is that we still would be doing these campaigns. The difference being is Donald Trump can show up and brag about American dominance, talk about national security, talk about taking people's stuff, and MAGA will blindly train seal it for him because, again, they are absolutely a cult. In order to get liberals on your side, look no further than Ukraine. You have to give an excuse. Democracy's at stake, don't you know, in order to get liberals on board. They still would have done what happened in Venezuela, but they would be telling you that it was in the name of securing Venezuelan democracy instead of securing Venezuelan oil and then taking the oil and taking the mineral rights. They would have taken out Khomeini and then said it was in the name of stopping the protests that were happening. It was in the name of Iranian democracy, and a lot of you would be going along for the ride. It's a matter of understanding that liberals are much more crafty in putting together a message for why war needs to happen, to get enough of you on board with why war needs to happen. Have any of you noticed that Donald Trump has cut off the bulk of the funding and weapons to Ukraine, and Russia has not pushed past the Donbass region that they are currently mining, which has 70% of their access to rare earth minerals that they were negotiating over before the war started? The second you start to allow these pieces to fall into place, the easier it is to understand why you might be in favor of what took place in Iran had Kamala Harris been president. But one thing I know for certain is MAGA would have been so much more angry that Kamala Harris took out the leader in Iran that they are right now. Ben says, so the Trump administration is more honest than liberals. What I'm saying is, Ben, is that Republican Party has always been the more adamantly pro-war party during the Bush years, during the Obama years, during the Trump years, during the Biden years. Democrats have the audacity to pretend that they are anti-war and then go along doing the wars anyway. The difference with you, Ben, is if Kamala Harris were doing this, you would have already called in to talk about how Democrats are the war party. But as Donald Trump continues blowing up country after country, shipping billions of dollars to Argentina and Israel and inevitably to Iran to help out whatever proxies end up going in there and wherever else our money goes, all of a sudden it's in the name of patriotism. But it's when a liberal does it that you so clearly can see it, much like the rest of MAGA. And until we have a group of Americans willing to call it out in general, I don't care if Donald Trump's saying he's doing it for minerals or liberals saying they're doing it for humanitarian reasons and then doing it for minerals. I'm anti-war. I hope that helps. I hope you understand what show you're listening to. After 4 years almost, 3.5 years is actually a more accurate assessment. I hope you understand the message of the show at this point. The Orange Man is a war criminal. Joe Biden facilitated war criminals. One of those is actually worse than the other, and I don't think it's the one you want to hear it is, Ben. Waka waka. We're going to go to break because I need to calm down, and we'll put a bow on this third way conversation before shifting gears here. Anybody else wants to chime in, 920-281-1150, and we'll be back in a little bit. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, Political Voices Network. Oh, I'm MAGA. Now that Donald Trump's president, Epstein clients are going to prison. Oh, well, actually, you didn't care about the Epstein file when Joe Biden was president, and now that Trump's been mentioned 38,000 times, I'd rather ignore it. MAGA, abolish the IRS. Now MAGA. Actually, I think taxing imports and specifically increasing taxes on the middle class and anybody who buys anything is a much more effective way to do this. Waka waka, I'm MAGA. Every gun law is an infringement on my rights. Well, actually, now that ICE is murdering Americans in the streets, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to pull a Kyle Rittenhouse and bring a gun to a protest. Don't question me. No new wars. I'm MAGA. Actually, we should do regime change in Venezuela and Iran and lose American lives and continue championing these things because at least I get this nice Whittle trucker hat. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Yeah, Ben, this is Lee calling from Oshkosh.
Yeah, what's up, Lee?
The reason I'm calling, you look at how many years we've been in wars.
Yeah.
You know, and we're in this huge budget deficit, per se, as they say. Well, if you take all those wars out of it and you make the millionaires pay their fair share, we would have a huge budget surplus.
1,000%. Every metric, what you're saying is 100% spot on. I've even used the examples before, Lee. I don't know how often you listen, but I've said we invented Social Security. We invented Medicaid. We invented Medicare. We built the entire infrastructure that connected this country together, and we did not accrue a deficit or debt because we were taxing appropriately and weren't perpetually embroiled in wars specifically for made-up reasons. And yet somehow Reagan-era Republicans, and by extension everybody that came afterward, have somehow spun this into a narrative that actually Somalis and Mexicans have all of our tax dollars. And unfortunately, enough of us are not well read enough that we will fall for it in perpetuity, it looks like. But I think you're spot on with your assessment.
Love your show, man.
Thank you, Lee. You take it easy. I'm a big Lee fan. Larry says Lee's on it because he said every war, Larry from North Carolina, that is, and thank you for calling, Lee. Every war we've been in since the Vietnam War has cost cost us dearly at the gas pump. Every president that took us to war was unable to balance the budget during their presidency, increasing the deficit. If we have to be at war, at least let's not be on the Nazi Germany side. No, I think that's a fair assessment. And honest to godly, see, this is the duopoly that I talk about all the time. And this is the best that I can describe it, given what took place over the course of the last 48 hours. Every Republican in my life, Reagan, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., and the Orange Man, all took benefits away from poor people, cut taxes for billionaires, and then blew up a Middle Eastern country and started a war. And then they give that inevitably to a Democrat, a blue MAGA Democrat, because again, they could reverse course much quicker than they lead you on to believe. And if there's anything to be gleaned by this Trump presidency, it's that a left-leaning president can show up and do universal health care and do universal child care and legalize marijuana and do all these things without the help of Congress. And when Congress tries to stop it, just call them names and keep moving on as if everything is absolutely fine. And then the courts will strike it down and you can just say, F the courts, I'm going to do it anyway. And it's been borne out to be allowed to happen. Only with Trump, it has been about making sure that a mass virgin army still has the legal capacity to murder people in the streets, and he can start an illegal war that results in blowing up school children. There could be a candidate who, instead of doing a bunch of bad stuff, could do good stuff. See how that works? You could have a president who forces a lot of good things onto the public and kind of move on from there. But where liberals lose us is, like, let's use Bush Jr. going into Obama, because that's kind of what resulted in me entering into adulthood here. You have George Bush, war criminal, with Dick Cheney, also a war criminal, lying us into two wars based on information that was proven to be inaccurate. We rack up the debt and deficit. At the same time, banks are using rules put in place by the Clinton administration in order to essentially treat our housing market like a giant casino. So you have a recession brought about by two forever wars that were based on lies that we absolutely shouldn't have gone into. We had a tax cut on billionaires under George Bush Jr. that would have been the second time in my life that we cut taxes for billionaires, while never considering increasing taxes on billionaires like what we did prior to St. Reagan. Obama takes over, a recession happens, he doesn't pull us out of the wars, and instead of bailing out the working class, he turns around and ends up bailing out the bank CEOs. And then he says, trust me, bailing out the CEOs is going to be better for all of us. It wasn't. It was better for the CEOs, really wasn't better for the rest of us. And so that's kind of the cycle where one hand washes the other. MAGAs are willing to attribute a 9% inflation rate to Joe Biden, despite the fact that he inherited a pandemic. And then he got us down to 2.5% inflation, gave that to Trump. And everyone says, look, Trump got us down to 2.5 inflation. Meanwhile, he has cut benefits for the poor, cut taxes for the rich, and bombed a Middle Eastern country. When Republicans politically get their brains beat in 2026 and get their brains beat in 2028 because of this trash-ass presidency, whatever Democrat shows up is not going to move at a fast enough clip. And God forbid they also end up with a trifecta, much like Biden did with the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They're also going to have to juggle not getting increases in the minimum wage or massive tax hikes on the wealthiest earners. All the things that benefited the working class prior to St. Reagan. They're going to have to make up a new batch of excuses, ultimately resulting in the consternation and frustration with Blue MAGA that results in Republicans getting back into power so they can cut social spending, cut taxes for the rich, and blow up a Middle Eastern country. And that's the duopoly. I actually saw it, and I see I have a call. I'll get you on in a second. I saw this, two calls actually. I saw this portrayed as a picture, and it really helped to kind of highlight how it works. It says the Republican Party is here to turn the gear to the right, which is what they do every single time. Our furthest left party, the Democrats, are center-right Republicans. Their job, the Democratic Party's job, is to minimize any kind of rollback of rightward movement in this country. That's the way the duopoly works. Republicans drag us to the right. Democrats bend over backwards. They tried to get Andrew Cuomo elected, accused 12 times over of sexual harassment, and made COVID decisions that killed thousands of people's grandparents, but they'd rather see him as mayor than somebody who's actually going to do something to the left of center. So you have a Democratic Party preventing any kind of movement towards the left, and a Republican Party that drags us screaming to the right while screaming at the top of their lungs that Democrats are so far left, even though there is not a single factually accurate statement to back that claim up. We got 2 calls. We're going to have to move quickly here. Hello, you're on Outside the Box. Hello.
You talking to me, Ben?
Yeah, what's up, Dave? What's on your mind?
I'm wondering if the long game started after FDR died and Truman was in there, that mysteriously 2 Jewish people from America leaked the nuclear secrets to the, I don't know, Russians, Chinese, I don't know who it was. But, you know, we had a long path of FDR was in there, 4 terms or something, so the long game of the Republicans started way back at the end of World War II. I mean, we had to be the big dog in nukes, and we had to start that whole nuke war, you know, the Cold War.
Sure.
And it's like, we just can't have social programs. You know, we have to, I'm just saying the Republicans started our path that we had to be the big dog and get this nuke thing going. And was it just a conspiracy that the secrets was leaked to our enemies, or did we actually want that to occur?
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
The whole nuke thing.
And I think you're on to something there, Dave, that I think FDR was the big wake-up moment for a lot of the billionaire class. And I talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I might have to bring Harvey K on, who's an RFD expert, or an FDR expert, but he always highlights, like, there was a coup effort by the wealthiest Americans to try and stop what was happening. And FDR's decisions, the dude doesn't walk on water. He also did internment camps. And I appreciate the call, Dave, but I have to keep moving. But he did so many good things that benefited the American population for 45 years, and it was only because Reagan showed up and spread this bootstrap thing. I got a texter, Jimmy, who says, give everybody all the free stuff possible and that'll fix everything. He's clearly being sarcastic, but he doesn't realize that healthcare wasn't allowed to operate for a profit till 1973. He doesn't realize that people before the boomers had their neighborhoods built by the government and sold at a really cheap rate. He doesn't realize that if you went to college in 1970, you were able to go to college for working 300 hours of a minimum wage job. If you were in college right now, you'd have to work 7,600 hours at a minimum wage job to afford the average college today. People like Jimmy are completely oblivious to the fact that FDR existed and actually provided people with the appropriate amount of resources in order to start life. He gets confused, as do a lot of people in my text line. Hello, you're on Outside the Box. Hello.
Well, hey, Ben.
Yeah, hey, Brian, what's up?
Well, 95% of people never saw this coming, and 94% don't care. So here we are, we're at war. You know, it's funny how now the Congress people are pushing back, you know, how they're mad. I've written more letters to my Congress than I've to Santa Claus, and I still get the same form letter back, and still Congress, they're not around. No action in every category: economy, war, defense spending, social services, ICE action, Epstein. Congress, like the Supreme Court, have given their power to the Trump administration. Every time I see an old guard Democrat, I want to puke when they say, well, we condemn this. And every time I see a traditional Democratic pundit on the Sunday morning program saying the Democrats are getting their message, they're going to get it out there. Both parties are playing the same game, and the citizens of the United States are getting screwed on every single level. And here we go again. And I'm tired of us talking about Democrats and Republicans like they're two different sides. They're the same side. We don't have a chance. We don't have a voice. And every time a voice rises up, both parties pound it down like a nail with a hammer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have a lot of thoughts about what you said there, Brian. I think it was very well stated, but I am pressing up against it. I'm going to have a little bit of time on the other side of the break. I will bring up what Brian said there to put a bow on this show. Everybody stay right where you are. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. This show's hilarious sometimes, even when nothing funny is happening in the world of politics. I intended to come back this segment with Afro Man's Because I Got High playing as my bumper music, but then I forgot because I got a whole bunch of texts in between. I got a call from some random listener who's never called before, who was on point with everything I said until I said we need to legalize marijuana because, you know, only like 70% of the American population wants that. And then apparently I overstepped. Then we have a first-time texter who says that Brian was spot on with his assessment, to which I just said agreed. We have Jimmy, who you can present him with the facts of what happened in previous administrations, and reality doesn't set in with that cat at all, just at all. And then I received a text on my personal line that says, great show, man. Not an easy ask to put on those headphones and fire up a microphone knowing you'll have to correct people at least half the time. You're the best. Keep fighting the good fight, and thank you for helping us listeners gain some clarity. I appreciate that very much, and that's from an individual who does not text me very often about the show, so I appreciate that one very much. Look, my opinion obviously informs the show that I do for you guys every single day, but the fact is that oftentimes when I am talking to you guys, I am taking a position. I called the show Outside the Box because I thought that I was unique in the way that I thought about certain things. I now, the longer I go about this, the more I begin to realize that there's a lot more people wired like me than I think I was ever willing to acknowledge, and I'm thrilled by that. But the fact is, when I talk about what it takes to improve the middle class, I'm not making things up. I don't want things for free. I just want the same things previous generations received before us. I don't want my tax dollars going to war that is for made-up reasons, like stopping nukes or whatever dumb crap MAGA is going to tell us over the course of the next 24 hours before I can talk to you again. Give us health care, you losers. Stop defunding social programs, you losers. Stop cutting Elon Musk's taxes, you losers. Do something for the working class. Because fundamentally, what it seems like is we're voting between, yes, the war is going to happen no matter what, but either poor people can either live in relative poverty or in abject poverty, and you get to decide which one of those two is going to happen based on which president ends up coming out of the election every single 4 years. It's time to demand something more. So when these groups like Third Way, like where's all the other ones? I wish I had highlighted this before I came on. There's like a handful of them. The Searchlight Institute, Majority Dems, Next American Era, and so many others. Tell them pound salt. They don't know what we want. We know what we want, and we want to see a little bit of a return to power of the people. I'm calling it a show. Do not fall for what you're seeing in mainstream media. Download the app. Check me out on YouTube. Do all the things. And we'll be back tomorrow with an update on all this horse crap that's going to continue going on for a long while, I'm sure. Catch you guys tomorrow. Haley's up next.